Welcome to another episode of the Emetophobia-Free podcast. Today we are joined by two lovely guests. We have Coach Philippa from Cheshire in the UK. Hello, Philippa.
Hello.
And we have one of her clients, Kane. Hello, Kane.
Hi.
Hi. So I do not know anything about Kane's story. All I know is that he's got a very good story to tell. He's had emetophobia. He's been through the program with Philippa, and we are here today to share his story. So I'm very excited, just as excited as all the listeners are, I'm sure, to hear about Kane's story. So Kane, I'm going to hand straight over to you if that's okay. Do you want to start at the very beginning and tell us where your emetophobia started?
Yes, of course. So my story starts around about my mid-20s, about 25 years ago. I'm serving in the Royal Navy. I'm down in Cornwall in one of the naval bases down there, and I'm out on a night out with colleagues. And there was an incident that pretty much triggered my emetophobia, or what I now know to be anxiety, a fear. And from then on, things in my life completely changed. I think on that night, when I think about it now, I can't really recall how I felt, but I know I was on edge about it, kept thinking about what happened. And it sort of progressed from there. And I noticed things happening when I was going into meetings from that day onwards, where I was a little bit on edge about it all, really. I wanted to sit near the end, was uncomfortable. I felt what I now know is the anxiety and just a need to sort of get out and just wanted to be away from this whole group of people. And that was where it began, really. And then it sort of progressed as the years went on. And I honestly thought I was the only one that was experiencing this at the time. And that desire for control that I now know was really taking a grip into my life. And so things were changing, going to the cinema, going to the theatre, going out. There was all that safety seeking that I wasn't aware of. I was happy with doing that, but didn't really realise what it was at the time. And so I thought my story, in essence, is 25 years of not really knowing myself or what I was doing. I was just doing it and getting on with it and just making my life comfortable. And what I've said to people recently, especially my wife, is I was managing myself, and that's how I just continued my life. I just got on with it. I didn't go to the doctors. I just got on with life, and just dealt with whatever happened. And for some reason, I've managed to muddle through life, albeit various things that are normal to people became uncomfortable, and I tended to sort of sit back. And I guess in the grand scheme of things, and I've been thinking about it, I began to mask myself. So in the last 25 years, I really and truly believe that I haven't been myself, and I haven't been the true Kane Dingley. And this program, once I sort of came across it, has been a real deep dive into my life and me. And not only from that point of the trigger of me developing emetophobia, but prior to that, and really analysing who I was, because there's lots of things that I've learned along with Philippa, especially from the TQ quiz questionnaire and everything, of who I really am. And I think there's a lot to be said prior to the emetophobia being triggered, to who I became over that 25 years as well, if that makes any sense. And so life just completely changed, and I was quite lucky, really. I managed to dictate everything I did in terms of not going on holiday on a plane or traveling in cars, taking control of that, really having a real huge desire for control, but without anybody really knowing, because I was unaware of what was happening to me until really this year. It's a real revelation to understand who I am and what I've been going through. And quite sad, I guess, really, because I kind of wished I could go back and change it all, but we're here now. I've moved on. I'm on a new journey now. I call it Chapter 12 outside the program. Chapter 12 being me and progressing and getting to that point of thriving. So that's my story in a nutshell. Pretty much like everyone else I've listened to, and like I say, all the podcasts I've listened to, I can relate to. There's all little nuggets. You think you're the only person. You think it's only happening to you. You're the worst person who's suffering from this, and it's such a revelation and a relief. It's almost a comfort blanket in itself when you hear the stories that you can relate to. You almost just want to. It's emotional. You feel like just sitting down and crying, and you think, I can go somewhere with this. I can change. I can fix myself. Yeah.
Amazing. So it's the loneliness of it, isn't it? And then you realise that there are other people out there like you, and you think, I'm not the only one, and I do that. And it's such a relief to have those feelings. And I just at this point want to say thank you so much for coming on and sharing your story, because that's what you're now providing for other people. Right. So it's come full circle. If you got that from listening to the podcast and the testimonials, you're now that person sharing your story, and you're going to have that impact on other people. So thank you so much for taking the time to be here today
Yeah,
for
thanks for
me.
having me.
So, in terms of life with emetophobia, then, so you created it 25 years ago when you were in the, do you say the Royal Marines or the Navy? Sorry,
Royal Navy, yeah.
the Royal Navy. From that point on, then, when your desire for control ramped up and your catastrophic thinking ramped up and your hypervigilance, how did it affect your life in those 25 years? What did life with emetophobia look like for you, Kane?
Honestly, it was bland, if that makes sense.
Mm,
Um, I've developed or had developed 25 years of just not really getting excited about stuff, just not looking forward to stuff, or having to do stuff, and then not so much. My stories, I guess, is a bit different because I wasn't brooding or catastrophizing as much as I have been in the last couple of years, if that makes sense.
mm,
So I've managed to almost keep a bit of a lid on this emetophobia. I just, like I said, I became accustomed to it. It was part of me. It was
mm-hmm,
something changed in my life, and I just thought I've got to get on with it. Um, and so I managed for some reason not to go on holiday for a good chunk of that time. I've already gone on planes. I had to go to meetings, obviously, with the companies I work with. So I'm originally from Cambridgeshire. My family's still up there, so I would make excuses with colleagues and say, look, I'm going to go up and see my family after, so I'll go up on my own. Is that okay? And I
mm,
managed to pull that off every time without anyone sort of challenging me, saying, come on, it's
yeah,
about time we car shared, all those sorts of things. Really, a real desire for control and just, you know, getting away with it. So yeah, and anything like that. Concerts. I went to a couple of sort of festivals I'd been to, but it was just horrible.
mm,
And trying to get out there. I've got a group of friends that they don't even know about this at the moment, but I haven't been to a concert for a good couple of years with them now, and we have this group of friends we go away with, and I'll just say no.
mm-hmm,
Up until sort of moving forward now. Hopefully, I can change all that. But
mm,
certainly life just becomes restricted,
yes,
and just mundane, and like I
mm-hmm,
said, bland. And you just get through it, but there's no real excitement or anything to look forward to, and it all disappears. And I'm sure anyone can relate to that. Again, people
yeah,
would be like, "Yeah, I feel like that too."
yeah,
It's a really strange place to be, if I'm honest, because I can remember prior to that just being absolutely excited about everything: holidays, going to a concert, taking a car journey with a friend, going away for a weekend, just spending time with family. Um, it's remarkable, really, what it can do to you, and just
mm-hmm,
remove the life and soul of you.
yes.
That's certainly how I feel.
Yes, and a very lonely place to be, I'm sure, if you had this
Incredibly,
high desire
incredibly.
for control, but
Yeah.
not sharing why you had that with anyone. Did you tell anybody that you had emetophobia, or did you not know that you had it?
No, the first person I told was my wife, and that was only this year. And we briefly touched on it. So, sort of post COVID, things got worse for me, and I
Mm,
think COVID's probably got a lot to answer for a lot of people. Um, I'm not an introvert as such, but I like my own space, and I like
mm,
to just hang out with my people, my family. So
yeah,
it was a bit of a blessing in disguise for me. It's like, right, COVID, can't go anywhere, great. So, and things are going to take time to ramp up. So my wife's like, well, we'll only go holiday in the UK for this next couple of years until we, really think we're well and truly sure that COVID's gone. So that was great for me. I don't want to go on a
mm-hmm,
plane. I don't want to go on a ferry. That's great.
yeah,
So I think now knowing what I've learned, that wasn't helping me. And this is why in the last sort of few months or prior to getting to the program, the sort of catastrophizing, all those negative thinking styles really got their claws into me. Um, and we were going to Greece a couple of years ago, and it was the first time I felt like I really need to disappear. I want the world to swallow me up, and I can't do this anymore. We're going on holiday on a plane, and for probably about a month or two. I was in bits, but I managed to get home at the end of the day and just mask it. And there was a point where I nearly broke down, and my wife's like, "Are you okay?" And I sort of explained to her how I felt. But at that time, we didn't really delve into it, and it wasn't until this year um, when I pretty much felt like I was having a nervous breakdown. I'd been up to see my mum. I was coming back, listening to some podcasts. I was at a point where I was getting a bit, my whole brain was being fried about anything that I was thinking of and what's going on here. And explained to Claire, my wife, and it's just not getting any better. So I started listening to podcasts, and on this weight journey back, I've just gone into complete meltdown. I've got a few events coming up. I'm thinking I can't do this anymore, and my whole life's just changed in that 300-mile journey. Really strange, can't explain it. And so I explained it. We talked about it, and then we Googled it. And my wife just pleasantly said, "You're emetophobic." I went, "Sorry, what's that?
Right.
Never heard of it before." And then it just sort of it went from there. Really, it was nice to label it, I guess. Bit unsure at the time, thinking, "Really?" And then to read all the stories, stumble across your website, the program. Again, like most people, a bit reluctant. I hadn't even, like I said, I hadn't been to the doctors. I touched on CBT at the end of last year because I knew there was something not right with me in terms of my thinking, albeit it wasn't a roller coaster white knuckle ride at the time. And so I went on that journey, but it just wasn't helping because there was no one like Philippa to be there sort of every 2 weeks or weekly to really coach you through it. I was at a real loss then, and that wasn't helping. And then I wasn't looking forward to Christmas, and then obviously it leads up to a kind of mental breakdown or whatever it was to where we are sort of today, really.
Yeah.
So told Claire is the answer to your question.
Yeah.
I then told my mum a couple of days later, and she was truly gutted and upset for me because it all kind of made sense. I think for a long time, even my brother probably thought I wasn't the same person. We used to have a right laugh prior to that, and I would go home just be quiet because I'm managing myself again, just getting through life, thinking about what's going to happen that weekend. We weren't doing anything crazy, but we might be going out to Cambridge for the day, or I might be going over here, or we might be having dinner, or we might be doing this. So, in my mind, I'm managing it, and that's how you become a bit bland because you're just constantly managing yourself.
Yes.
That's what I was doing. So it really
Yeah.
consumes your life, and it's tiring.
It's exhausting.
Yeah.
Absolutely exhausting. Completely. So you told your wife, and you found the word emetophobia, which is a relief at the time, but then found the program a bit skeptical. What was the turning point? What was the turning point for you to go, "Right, I'm going to give this a go"? How did that look?
I listened to a couple of the podcasts,
Okay.
and those first two, it was like listening to me, if that makes sense. Everything,
Yeah.
I can't remember which ones they were now, but again, a revelation. And I'm thinking, wow, it's not just me. And then reading all the facts, there's millions of people in the world, and then okay. And then obviously realizing these people had cured themselves, or certainly been on a journey where they've managed to really get a hold of it and change their mindset and their foundations and really get back to how life was. I think the first podcast I listened to would have been yourself, and I can't remember the lady's name. You were talking about traveling, and that's
Oh
what
yes,
really
Lauren.
struck
Yeah.
a chord. I thought, wow, this woman can get in a car with someone. Honestly, it was that moment. Like, so if she can get in a car and she's felt like me, why can't I do this? And then for a couple of weeks, I went to that sort of reluctancy, skeptical, like, yeah, actors, aren't they?
Yeah.
It can't be real. Honestly, I would imagine everyone goes down that road.
Yeah,
And
I did.
and then in the end, because I felt so awful, and I got to the point, and honestly, I was. If it wasn't for Claire, I don't know what would have happened. But that weekend and for a couple of weeks, I was just lying on the bed. Didn't never felt so low. Really, really dark place. And it was Claire that sort of, she was really good. She was sort of the person that stoked the embers in my body of the fire that had gone out for the first time in my life. And she's like, "You've got to keep going." And she was right. Lost my thread now, but that was the starting point. And like I mentioned in our group chat, it was there was no way I could suddenly just not do anything. I thought if I take time off work, I'm going to become agoraphobic. I'm not going to leave this house. And at that point, I didn't want to leave the house. Even taking the dog for a walk fried my brain. And I don't know where it came from. And this is what I was trying to explain to Philippa sort of a couple of weeks into the program. It was the weirdest thing ever. I was rock bottom for some reason. And it was giving the emetophobia a real chance to get right under my skin. It was horrible. But slowly but surely, those first couple of weeks were uncomfortable. Then reached out after watching the podcasts, and obviously Philippa reached out to me. Excuse me, and that was a moment. All these little snippets are moments that make you feel almost hopeful again, and you start feeling a little bit excited. So you had a chat with Philippa, and that was great. It really, really sort of put the fire back in my belly again, and I thought I can do this. I've got to do it. What else is there? You know, the CBT isn't working. I was borderline looking at hypnotherapy. No, they didn't reply, luckily. And then obviously just grabbed this program by the horns and thought, I've got to give this a go. And the rest is kind of history at the moment.
History, absolutely. Yeah. So what was it like then? Because there'll be people watching this who haven't been through the program, especially men watching this, because I believe you're the first man to be on the podcast, right? So,
wow.
You know, and it's, I know, what an honor. So there's, you know, it is a mainly female phobia, mainly female suffer from it. So it's amazing to have you here to share your story. So there will be other men watching this thinking, oh, cracky, I think I've got this too. And listening to your story and be skeptical as you were. Could you describe in your own words what it's like to go through the program with Philippa and just in general, what does it feel like? What is the experience like to go through it?
For me, it was a real eye-opener. It was a saving grace for me, definitely, but a real eye-opener. And like I said earlier, it was a deep dive into Kane Dingley and to really understanding myself, as well as the emetophobia, park that for a little bit. It helped me understand where I was and who I was. You know, I've lacked confidence for years. My family would tell me that. You know, no self-esteem, didn't believe in myself, didn't trust myself, always worrying about what people think. You know, it was a real mixing pot, the perfect recipe for emetophobia. Do you know what I mean? Yes. It was perfect. Yeah. And I'd done all that, you know, and an eye-opener in reading all the various things about the belief systems. You know, I completely reversed all my belief systems, and they were all negative. Building those psychological foundations, the desire for control, everything I learned, I didn't even know what anxiety was until, you know, me and my wife were looking into this. You know, and as strange as that sounds, I think men don't look after themselves, and they're not kind to themselves. That's one thing I remember my wife saying, you've got to be kind to yourself. I'm like, what does that mean? Does it mean a candlelit bath? No. And I think with this program, certain chapters like language, and I know, Philippa, that's your favorite chapter, is one thing that really helped me, because I've berated myself for years, you know, and you quite easily do it subliminally. My whole life was all this negative stuff was habitual. That's what I'd done in essence. So for anyone that's thinking about this or being a bit reluctant, thinking the way I was and the way other people were in terms of, no, this can't be true, it is. You need to really grab it, and it is a deep dive into you and help, certainly for me, to become the real you again. And that's where I am. I'm not the finished article, don't get me wrong, but I certainly feel 100 times better than I did 3 or 4 months ago. You know, it's incredible. I enjoy life now massively. I've still got things to do. I'm not scared of doing them, but the program, all those chapters, it hits every nail on the head. It's perfect. It's really well written. It's well constructed, and it really helps untie or undo all that negative energy that you've got in your body, you know, and really stand back and take a look at yourself.
So when you have all this new information, because a lot of the program's information, isn't it? You're learning about yourself, you're learning about your mind and psychology and how your mind works. Once you have the information, that's only part of the journey, right? Applying it and putting it into practice is where the progress is seen. So what does that look and feel like? Because reading the manual, watching the podcast, watching the videos isn't going to make much of a difference. It's doing it, isn't it? So what does that feel like?
definitely. And I think you can make the mistake, and I nearly did. It's like, oh, I'll get a manual, I'll read the book, and I'll be cured.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
initially it's a great read, and then I think when you see the actions, you suddenly think, oh god, exposure therapy, and it's initially it's a little bit daunting, but it's not. It's all stuff that's manageable, and
Mm.
it's very easy to do, which I know you keep pushing. It's an easy program to do. You've just got to want to do it, and you've got to
Yeah.
put the effort in. Now, I think initially, especially with the thinking styles that I suffer from, so the black and white thinking and perfectionism, they were holding me back. So initially, I wanted to get the book read, I wanted to get the actions done, and I wanted to be
Mm.
cured. And then, just briefly, and Philip will back me up. I was messaging Philip saying, "Oh, why is this not working? Oh, I feel like this, blah blah blah." And you've just got to give it time. Everyone's
Yeah.
different, and
Yeah.
any advice I would give is bite-sized chunks. We're all different. It's all relative. So
Mm.
for me, I just stopped and thought, right, it's only 2 weeks, Kane. It's only 3 weeks, Kane. It's only 4 weeks, Kane. It's not going to disappear overnight. And so I just stepped back, slowed down, and just started taking it easy. And I started reading the chapters twice. So
Yeah.
in between meeting up with Philip, I was reading the chapters twice just to make sure it was going in, and
Mm.
taking all that information. I was utilising it. Processing the positives. I was reading them 5 times a day to help my self-esteem. I set up reminders on my phone after listening to the podcast that Lisa did with Rob,
Mm.
and I thought that's going to be enough. So it's my phone's pinging all the time, so I'm reading something. The affirmations was where I started. Philip had, when we first spoke prior to doing the program, it doesn't matter what happens, I will cope. I started that, and then the sort of waking up in the morning. Today's going to be a great day. All those things that at the time you think, okay, is this really going
Yeah.
to work? It does, and
Mm-hmm.
it's mind-boggling. And I was always looking for that penny drop moment after doing all these actions and that, and it wasn't coming. But then it did. I was driving home one day, and I suddenly realised that my belief systems had changed because I didn't feel nauseous like I was the weeks before, if that makes sense.
Mm.
And I wasn't thinking about what I was going to be doing that night if I was going out somewhere, and I wasn't worrying about when I was going to band practice. It all started calming down, like everything was becoming normal, but it does take effort, and it's
Yeah.
it's it's easy effort, if that makes sense. You've just got to put the time in. That's
Yes.
all I would say. Yeah, and they're all enjoyable actions, if I'm honest. I guess I was quite lucky, really, and I talk about those bite-sized chunks of doing stuff. Certainly, when you put stuff into action, where I work, there's an internal bus route. So the thought of going on a bus is like, oh, how am I going to do this? Just
Mm.
jump on a public bus? I don't even know how the buses work here. I've never been on a bus because I've avoided
Right.
them. Luckily, I had this internal bus, so I started there. It was a little journey up to the end of this whole site and back again. And don't get me wrong, it didn't disappear overnight. I did it again, and then it becomes habitual. That's the thing.
Mm-hmm.
And so then
Mm.
I thought, you know what? Okay. Then I went on a public bus, and then those sorts of things, a bit daunting. Then I went on a
Mm.
train, a little train journey, because there's a train just outside the gate where I work, and that goes into town. So then I got the bus back, doing little things like that, and it was getting better, if that makes sense. And I was using all
Mm.
those actions. I was having that sort of the anticipation, stood on the train track, and I knew what it was, and talking to myself. And I got through it. And I think that's the hurdle. It's that uncomfortableness. You've got to really talk to yourself. It is difficult, but you can do it, if that makes sense.
Yes.
And once
Yes.
you've done it, things become a little bit easier.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah.
Absolutely. Brilliant. Well, I'm going to let you into a little secret now. When we were waiting, me and Philippa joined this podcast a little bit earlier than yourself, just for how quickly the links got to you. And she said, he was brilliant to work with, really straightforward, because he just did it and he put the work in and he kept going and he made my job really easy. And from what you've just described there, I can see why she said that, because you just sort of went, right, okay, this is the job that I've got to do. These are the things I've got to do. Let's go and do it. And did that off your own back and your own initiative and kept yourself going to working towards that. So well done to you. And Philippa, do you want to share your experience of Kane and his journey at this point?
Absolutely, Michelle. Kane was an absolute pleasure to work with, and I knew his story would inspire people. So I'm so pleased he's come on this podcast. It's also, as we both know, an amazing social anxiety challenge. But Kane really immersed himself in the program and understood from the beginning that he needed to do that. He realized that the program had to be the most important thing in his life for those few weeks, which I do tell everybody, even at the initial consult, but sometimes I think people really underestimate this. Sessions were really enjoyable. Kane really engaged in the material. He asked me questions. He clarified things if there wasn't anything he understood or if he didn't know how it applied to him. I think he was the one that actually said at the beginning of this podcast, though, that one of the things that perhaps set him apart from other clients is that he realized very early on that he could fix himself and that he was responsible for fixing himself. Um, in a way that was helpful, though, that helped him build his self-esteem, but that was really crucial in his journey. I think there's lots of times that clients want you to fix them. They want somebody to do that, essentially because they feel very external in relation to their phobia and they feel powerless about it. So, one of our main jobs as coaches is to get clients to realize early on that this isn't actually a fear of being sick. It's not happening to them either. It's something that they're creating so that they can feel powerful enough to be able to change that. Kane realized that very early on, actually, that I couldn't do it for him. I was his coach. Yep. I was there to guide him. I was there at the end of a text or an email if he needed me, but it was him that was having to do the program. And doing is very much the word, as we say. You have to do it. You have to apply it every day to life. And Kane was able to do this. I think it's fair to say that home was definitely Kane's safe space. But even when he wanted to stay home, and this was well before the program started, he pushed himself to carry on with normal life as much as possible. I don't know, like going out with the family. But what was different before he started the program is that he hadn't been able to process that what he was doing was actually helping him overcome his phobia. So instead of coming back after going out with his family and saying, well done, that was hard, I did it, he would focus instead on how awful the experience had been, how anxious he was, and how it was great to be home. And so he was continuing at that point to process the experience externally. But that changed because he realized very, very quickly that the small steps that he was taking were actually helping him to get over his phobia. It didn't matter how long it was going to take, it didn't matter how small the steps were, but he was on a very predictable program and he kept saying to himself, this is predictable. I know I can do this. He believed in himself. That was crucial too. Maybe at the very beginning, when he didn't believe in himself, maybe I helped him because I always believed he could do this. I believe in all my clients. I know anyone can overcome this, but when you believe in someone in that way, that can hopefully help them believe and build that self-belief that they need themselves. And so, but very, very early on, Kane did believe in himself. Those small steps that he was taking, he realized were real steps that he could do this. That was key. I think he also understood very early on that emetophobia wasn't happening to him, probably before it's even discussed in detail in chapter 3. We talked a lot about it. I remember at the initial consults. It's really fundamental that people understand that the phobia isn't about being sick. And I'm sure when I say this to people, there are lots of people that nod and say, oh, yeah, okay. And really, they're thinking, whatever. But Kane, no, he really did get that. He didn't know how he created it at this point, and he knew it wasn't his fault. No one actually sets out to have this debilitating phobia, but he understood that it wasn't about being sick and that it wasn't happening to him. Another thing I think was really, really crucial in his journey and helped him have a very smooth journey. Over the weeks, he really proved he could do things differently. And it's not just in relation to emetophobia, he started to feel powerful about his emotions generally. And also, very importantly, he started being able to reassure himself more rather than looking to me for the answers. His journey definitely wasn't without blips. Blips are part of the process, very normal for anyone trying to overcome anything, but especially emetophobia.
Yeah.
Mm.
There are very high highs when you do the program. There can also be low lows. And again, I try and get that across to people so that when they feel like that and that comes along, that they are not disheartened. But he didn't give up. His attitude was really, really important. He picked himself up. He carried on going, in spite of those few bad days. And he definitely let me know about them, which was also really good when somebody does that. And, they're honest with you and open with you. We're in a much better position as coaches to be able to help instead of somebody that maybe doesn't want to share the lows because potentially of social anxiety. But Kane was very persistent. He didn't give up. He believed he could, and he knew that his bad days were just that, um, mainly because he was challenging something that he'd mostly avoided for years. Processing, I also think, was very, very key for Kane. Understanding how to process experiences internally. And that also relates to the fact that those very small things was doing, they were all in the right direction. He was very, very realistic with his expectations of himself as well. Initially, there was huge amounts of perfectionism, like there often is for people who have emetophobia. I think his score was something like 87% initially, which was high. But he realized that it was very, very unrealistic to expect no anxiety at all. Even now, when he's over emetophobia, lots of people think that they have to go from lots of anxiety to zero anxiety, which, is super unrealistic and very, very black and white. So Kane realized he could tolerate some anxiety, he could make room for it, and that creating a little bit of anxiety still does not mean that you're not over emetophobia. It just means you still have the odd anxious thought. We're human. Anxiety is normal. It's also information about some of the limiting beliefs that are still lingering, maybe. But his perfectionism came right down, and I think it ended up being about 17%. So this was very key in his success. It can be a massive hindrance, perfectionism, as I know Michelle, for getting over emetophobia, processing what you still haven't got quite right, or any anxiety that is still there. It can be a big blocker, with a lot of black and white thinking. Those two together can really be the things that stop people fully overcoming emetophobia. But generally, we had great chats. He asked lots of questions after he read the chapters. He'd often write me emails, actually, and before the session, asking me to clarify this and that. And I just think brilliant when I got those emails because it showed me he'd actually absorbed the material. And even if he wasn't applying it yet, he was applying it to himself and his life and his thinking, which is the start of the process of being able to then change things. He came to sessions with loads of energy, in spite of how he might be feeling that week. So his attitude was really key too.
Thank you.
Brilliant. That was great. Thank you, Philippa. So, moving forward then, or looking ahead, you would now say you're over emetophobia? Is that where you are, Kane? You think you don't have emetophobia anymore?
Yeah, I'd like to think so. Yeah, I'm confident in saying that. Like I say, I'm not the finished article. There's things
No.
I said to Philippa when I first engaged with her. I was at a point with my emetophobia. I thought I was comfortable with that. If I'd have discovered this program 10 years ago, that I probably would have gotten over it before then. Instead, and I think things happen for a reason in life. I had a bit of this breakdown this year to sort of wake me up and really sort of send me into this deep dive that I've taken. So yeah, I needed it. If I'm honest, I think like everyone, life is full of challenges, big or small. It's all relative, and sometimes they catch up with you. So this program came at the right time, as well as the emetophobia. It gave me a chance to really sort of understand myself and help myself and grow myself. Even I'm knocking on the door of 50, but you're always learning. And I'm about to enter a new chapter of my life. And I think going back to what Philippa said in terms of that energy and that drive with this whole program, I think I was at a point where I thought I have to do something about this. There is no turning back. So, I thought I could have quite easily got signed off by the doctor, and I thought, no, I can't. I need an anchor point, and that is work. Unfortunately, it's work. And so I carried on, and then I started going to the gym. That was my new anchor point, and there was little snippets, and I kept saying to myself, I've always been good at giving people advice and really sort of trying to big everyone up. So I'd never done that to myself. And I guess that goes back to what my wife says, like being kind to yourself. I was not doing that to myself. That was all missing after, not just that 25 years, but prior to that as well. I just thought I was rubbish at everything. I was just Kane Dingley. This is it. It's my life, but not now. And so that whole drive came from that. I think that lying on the bed, feeling sorry for myself, and thinking, where does it go now? And that was it. It just propelled me. And I guess in the beginning, Philip, it was a bit of desperation to make sure that I understood where each chapter, because some of the podcasts are like, you've got to go back. If you miss something, you've got to go back. And I kind of didn't want to do that. And that was part of the, hold on a minute, Kane, slow down. You don't have to do this in 3 weeks. You don't have to do this in a year. But put the effort in, and who knows what happens. You aim for the stars, you might just hit the rooftops. And so that's what I did. And I was just really tenacious. I thought, I've got to really help. I've really got to grab hold of this and get it gone, but not I wasn't berating myself. It was being kind to say, right, come on, you can do this. Do not give up. And that's all I would say to other people. And they'd be listening to this thinking, this sounds daunting. I can't do this. You can. And that's not a forceful, you can. Believe in yourself, trust yourself. And that's something I've never done. I'm here for me, and at one point I thought, I can't stay like this forever, because it's not fair on everyone around me. I want to take my family on holiday. I want to sit on a plane and enjoy it. I want to go and see my brother and have a laugh with him again. I want to go and share times with my mum and make more memories and see my mates and go to concerts. Or what else? What else is there? So I want to go that way, and that's Philippa and the program's helped me with. It's
Brilliant.
Thank you.
Thank you. It's amazing. And just give us a time scale then, because obviously, when did you start the program, and what's the time scale we're working with here?
March, wasn't it? March 18th, I think.
Yeah.
So
April, May, June, so 2 or 3 months. Wow.
I'm just coming to the end of my journal now, which I've really enjoyed, to the point where I was going to ask for another one. I think it's really nice. It's just nice to reflect on the day, and I think that really helps. And I've bumped into people. I've told a couple of people, sort of the customer that I work for. There's a couple of people I got really close relationships with, who got really well with, and they're like, "Yeah, I write a journal." And there's people out there writing journals. They're not on this program, but they're writing journals because it helps them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And so I've really enjoyed that. I've really enjoyed processing the positives, because you just don't realise how many there are in your day. You think, I'm going to the shops on Saturday and that's it. Or I'm going to the cinema and that's it. There's not. Yeah. There's loads of little wins in life. And I think that's what helps you really sort of enjoy life and keeps you smiling. Just seeing someone saying hello is a win for me nowadays, And I really enjoy that. I really enjoy being that person. Yeah. I've stopped worrying about things when they go wrong. I just go home and I'm really on a good journey.
Brilliant. Love that. And a quick journey. If it's only started in March, we're only in June, and the beginning of June. So you've really put the effort in and turned your life around in a very short space of time there, Kane. So well done you.
Yeah, definitely.
That's
and
fantastic.
I had the help, not in a colluding way from my family, that we never spoke about it. And I kind of said that to my wife. I said, look, I'm on this journey, and she's a wealth of knowledge when those sorts of things. And it's really helpful. I said, look, don't take this the wrong way, but I want to try and do this on my own. And she's like, yeah, fine. I'm here if you need me. And we would talk about it over coffee on a Saturday. How you feeling today? I'm like this. Okay. All right. And in essence, she'd help push me in the beginning. Certainly, come on, you've got to get out. Let's go and take the dog for a walk. So she did help in that sense massively. And then it sort of let me go, and I carried on. And now I enjoy talking about it, my experiences and what I've learned, just to share that sort of new mindsets, the psychological foundations, the belief systems. It's all really interesting stuff as well, and I think that's what helps you understand that this is just a science. It's not a fad or anything like that. It's real. It really makes sense. And especially with the CBT, where you're only working on this bit, but not that bit.
Yeah.
Makes perfect sense.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Amazing stuff. Now, do either of you have any final words of wisdom for anybody listening who potentially is either suffering with emetophobia or is supporting a loved one with emetophobia? What would be your advice?
You need to give this program your all. This program will help you overcome emetophobia. It's very simple, it's very predictable, but you have to give it your all. You need to make it your priority. You can't just tiptoe into the program because you're not going to get over it. Really need to throw yourself into it. And I'll say this to all of my clients, okay? But Kane did that. It's very, very simple. He took that on board. He did what he needed to do. And anyone else can do the same. You have to stop doing the things that are reinforcing the emetophobia, though, at the same time as doing the things that are overcoming it. I also wanted to share one of Kane's big achievements. He hasn't mentioned himself. He's very humble and modest. Kane had given up drumming because of his phobia. He was in a band. He was quite a good drummer. And after session
Right.
2, I got this email from him telling me that one of his biggest challenges was going to be joining a band. And he did. He pushed himself. He tolerated the anxiety of it. And now he's been drumming and he just told me he's been doing gigs, which is lovely to see. I'm really proud of everything he's achieved. But more than anything, I know that he is too. He's completely changed his inner voice, which is now really supportive, really encouraging. And I know he's fully over this and he's going to do amazingly well.
Fantastic. Well done,
Yeah.
you.
Yeah, I had a small gig last Tuesday. So, and again, I was a little bit nervous about it, but on the day, and I went through all the things I'd learned, and it was such a nice day at work. And I thought when I get there, there's going to be a few bands on, so I'm going to be a little bit on edge, waiting, anticipation, all that. But no, it was fine. Played a few songs, and again, that's another win, I think, in terms of beating that fear, the anxiety. It's a step up, so you can. All that evidence is like gold. And you've probably heard people say that it is, and I've always had that evidence, even up till now. But the perspective, you can't see it when you're low. You just can't see it. That's what I was going to mention as well. That sort of I managed to get to the point in terms of when I was low in the mornings, certainly, to remember that my perspective later on today would be absolutely different. So why not think about that now? And that kind of worked as well. So that where you can't see how you feel when you're buzzing or thriving, it's going to happen. So why not think about it? So why not trust yourself and say, I know I'm going to feel like this afternoon. So why not feel like it now? And that kind of helped. And
Nice.
That's kind of what happened with that day as well. I'm going to enjoy that tonight.
Yeah. Yeah, which is part of the program, isn't it? It's envisaging how you want things to go and how you want to feel in those situations. So that's fantastic.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Brilliant. Okie doke. So I think, unless anyone has anything else to say, that wraps up our podcast for today, would you say?
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you so
Really
much.
enjoyed it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed hearing your story, and thank you again so much for being here and for sharing your story, Kane, because there is so much to be taken away from that. The total immersion, as Philippa mentioned, has helped you get from where you are, where you were a few months ago, literally 2 or 3 months ago, to where you are today with a completely different perspective on life, and you've done that. So the program's been there as a guide and support, Philippa's been there as a guide and support, but you've put the work in. And that's a really important message to anybody listening, is that it's not a fad. It's not something that will it's a quick fix. This is a skill set now that Kane has for the rest of his life, and he knows that he can make the best of the rest of his life because he has this skill set and he knows what to do. So he's just going to keep doing that. And it's not something that ever runs out, which is really liberating and really exciting, isn't it? Because then you can decide, all right, then let's go on holiday. So where do you think you're going to go on holiday, Kane? Where's the first destination?
Oh, I know next year, because our kids are getting older and it'll probably be our last holiday. I think we'll probably go to Greece again. So,
Nice.
and yeah, I am looking forward to that now. I keep changing every week. And I know I'm getting better and better because probably up until a couple of weeks ago, I was still kind of dreading stuff like that. And I was thinking about it and I thought, you know what? There's a little bit of excitement in here, Kane. Oh, yeah. And, it's like, that's great. So, I know I'm moving forward, and I'm actually, I know we want to wrap this up. I'm actually going through the program again, but making notes now to really sort of polish myself off, not in a perfectionism type of way, but in case there's anything I've missed. So,
You've always got it, haven't you? Yeah. You've always got it, haven't you? You can always reflect back on it. It's always something that you've got in your pocket. You can get that manual out whenever you need it or whenever you want it, because it is such a an interesting thing, and it's the same with watching a movie. I always watch a movie, especially if I enjoy it more than once, because you're always going to see something different the second time you watch it, and the third time you watch it, you take something different away, you see something different. It's the same time with the manual, isn't it? So yeah, keep reading. Why not?
And I think
Why not?
those skill sets that we learn are always there, aren't they? I think everybody's got them. It's just some people have unlocked them at an early stage in their life, whereas others, for whatever reason, haven't. So I would urge anyone that thinks that this program isn't for them, it won't fix them. They will. It will. You know?
It will. Yeah, because it's something that you do. Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, both of you, for spending the time to be here today. It's been brilliant to have you on, and thanks definitely to Kane for sharing his story and for being a inspiration to other people out there, particularly men who are suffering with this and reluctant about coming forward and giving themselves a hard time for having it. So thank you very, very much for being here.
Thank you for having me. And I truly hope this does inspire people like I was inspired by all those podcasts.
Yeah. Thank you so much. Brilliant.